My name is David Miller. I'm 65 years old, and my hands are covered in scars and calluses from decades of working as a carpenter. Each groove, each nick, tells a story of hours spent in the workshop, building furniture that families cherished, watching the pride in their eyes as they placed my creations in their homes. These hands have shaped wood, shaped homes, and shaped my life. But now, they were trembling, not from age, but from betrayal. 18 years ago, Emily, my beloved wife, passed away. The love of my life, my partner, my confidant, my strength, gone in an instant. After her death, life became a quiet, hollow existence. The house we had built together felt too large, too empty, too cold. Michael, my only son, visited often, and with a mix of concern and gentle persuasion, suggested that I sell the house and move in with him. "Dad, why do you want to live alone? Come with us. We'll fix up the back room for you. You'll have company, and you won't be lonely," he said, smiling in a way that seemed warm, sincere, reassuring, combating. I trusted him. I loved him. I believed his words. So I agreed. I sold the house where I had raised my son, where Emily's laughter still lingered in the corners, where the smell of fresh pine from the furniture I built lingered in the air. The sale gave me $70,000, a small treasure representing decades of hard work, of waking up at 5 a.m., of aching muscles and splinters embedded in my fingers. That money, combined with my modest savings, felt like a safety net, a security blanket for my old age. Bishops. I tucked the bank book carefully in the back of my closet, checking it each month without fail. Every pension check I received, I gave to Michael. "Dad, don't worry about a thing," he would say, taking the envelope as if it were a routine chore, a transaction of no significance. And I believed him. Family is family. Mills. So in their house was simple but comforting. I rose early each day, prepared breakfast for everyone, even for Linda, my daughter-in-law, whose thank yous were quick and perfunctory. I took care of my grandson, Ethan, guiding him through homework, telling him stories about the furniture I had built, showing him that hard work and dedication could shape more than just wood. It could shape character, family, and memories. It seemed, for a time, that life had settled into a gentle rhythm. I found comfort in the quiet mornings, the hum of the stove, the rustle of the newspaper. But that Tuesday morning was different. It began like any other. Michael and Linda had left early, and Ethan was at school. I decided to make chicken soup, a dish Michael had adored as a boy, hoping to bring a flicker of nostalgia and warmth to our home. Stains in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming a tune Emily had loved. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the scratches on the cutting board, the old photographs on the wall, the subtle scent of my soup. Simmering on the stove. That's when I heard the front door open. Voices, Michael's and another man's, echoed in the hall. I froze, knife in hand, straining to hear. Kembut, Linda's father, a burly man, stern, with a thick mustache that made him seem unapproachable. We had never been close, but I had always tried to be cordial. I was about to greet them when I caught a phrase that made my heart stop. "And how are you going to pay for all that?" Expelled. "Michael, the truck and the renovation are almost $50,000, Robert said in that clipped tone that always made me feel small, as though Michael were merely his employee rather than his son. "Don't worry, just use my dad's card. He's loaded." The words struck me like a hammer to the chest. My knife slipped from my hand, thudding loudly onto the cutting board. I felt my stomach churn. My own son, my flesh and blood, had referred to me as loaded. Me, who had spent every day working my fingers to the bone, who had saved meticulously, who had sacrificed for him without complaint. All this time he had thought of me not as a father, not as a man, but as a source of money. A cold sweat ran down my back as I silently backed away, moving down the hall to my room. That small space at the back of the house, the room I had called my own for 18 years, suddenly felt like a sanctuary. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my trembling hands. All those years of toil, of patience, of giving, reduced in a single phrase: he's loaded. I opened my closet, the wooden box where I kept my important documents. There it was, my debit card. I barely used it because I trusted Michael, giving him cash whenever he asked. I held it, my mind spinning. Had he already used it without my knowledge? The thought made bile rise in my throat. Full's footsteps approached. My heart raced. I shoved the box back and sat quietly, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "Dad, are you okay?" Michael's voice called through the door, poking his head in without even knocking. "Yeah, son, just a bit of a headache," I lied. "Oh, well, listen, my father-in-law is here. We're going to look at some things for the house. Hey, would you mind lending me your card?" I froze. My card? He asked for my card as casually as if he were asking for a glass of water. Shoreline, I swallowed hard. "I left it at the bank. I had to get it renewed," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. Michael's expression flickered, just a brief flash of frustration, but his smile quickly returned, that same casual smile that had made me trust him all these years. That smile that had now become the mask of betrayal. Sitting there, I realized something terrifying. The years I had given him, my pension, my trust, my life, had been taken for granted. I had believed in the goodness of my son, in the strength of family. And now, in that quiet house, with the aroma of chicken soup filling the air, I understood the painful truth. Love and trust can be exploited, dismissed. That morning, a seed of doubt and sorrow was planted deep within me, and with it, the slow burning realization that my life, my savings, and my loyalty were no longer my own. And yet, even in that moment of betrayal, I remained calm, because I knew, somewhere deep inside, that this was only the beginning. The journey of understanding, of confronting, of reclaiming what had been mine, had begun. The days after that morning were strangely quiet. The house, which had once felt warm and lively, seemed different now. Even Ethan, my grandson, seemed oblivious to the tension in the air. He would come home from school, dump his backpack by the door, and chatter about his day, his questions and laughter filling the spaces that once held Emily's presence. I smiled at him, helped him with homework, and told him stories of carpentry. But a shadow lingered over me. The revelation about Michael's words haunted every thought, every movement. I told myself to stay calm. Perhaps I had misunderstood, I reasoned. Michael was my son. He wouldn't deliberately exploit me. And yet, I couldn't shake the memory of that casual phrase, the nonchalant smile as he referred to me as loaded. It replayed in my mind, over and over, like a cruel echo bouncing off the walls of the house I once called my own. My mornings remained the same, but now each task carried a weight of unease. I got up early, brewed coffee, and made breakfast for Michael and Linda, just as I had done for years. I watched them eat in silence, observing the ease with which they moved about the house, the way Michael took my pension for granted, the way Linda barely acknowledged my presence. She never meant harm, I told myself. She was her own person, wrapped up in her life. And yet, every cold glance, every hurried thank you, made my heart ache. After breakfast, I would retreat to my small bedroom at the back of the house. It had always been my refuge, a place to read, to plan projects, or simply to think. Now, it was a place to reflect on my mistakes, my trust, and the slow realization that I may have been naive all these years. I pulled out my old journals, flipping through pages filled with sketches of furniture, notes about carpentry techniques, and memories of a life I had poured into Michael's upbringing. The lines and sketches were my testament, a reminder that I was not weak, that I had contributed something meaningful to the world. One afternoon, a wooden chair I had built decades ago, Ethan came running into the room. Grandpa, look what I made at school today," he exclaimed, thrusting a rough, splintered wooden model into my hands. His enthusiasm was contagious, and for a moment, the bitterness that had been building inside me melted away. "That's wonderful, Ethan," I said, examining his creation carefully. "You've done a good job. You see, building something takes patience and care, just like your grandpa used to do with his furniture." He beamed, and I felt a flicker of pride. Maybe this was why I had endured so much. Maybe this was why I had trusted Michael, because family, no matter what, deserved my love and guidance. Turbulence. As the days passed, I began noticing small, unsettling changes. Bills arrived, and I realized that Michael had begun charging expenses to my account without asking. I would receive bank notifications, my stomach twisting as I logged in and saw sums deducted for renovations, tools, and repairs I had never consented to. Every dollar felt like a violation, a reminder that the son I had nurtured and trusted had become a man who saw me as a resource, not a father. Overwhelmingly, morning, I decided to confront the situation indirectly. I prepared breakfast and set it on the table, making sure to observe Michael's reaction. "Morning, Dad," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "How's your day going?" "Fine," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I noticed a few recent expenses on my account. I wasn't aware of them. Could you explain?" Michael froze for a moment, then laughed lightly. "Oh, that? Don't worry about it. It's just for the house stuff. I thought you'd be happy we're taking care of things." I looked at him, searching for a hint of remorse, a trace of shame, anything to tell me he understood the betrayal. But his smile remained casual, almost dismissive. I realized then that confrontation might not bring answers. Perhaps instead, I needed to be careful, observant, and strategic. Flooring. As the weeks went on, my suspicions grew. I started paying closer attention to conversations, to receipts, to phone calls. Each interaction revealed a new layer of deceit. Michael spoke about purchases, renovations, and loans as though my money had no value to me, as though my life's work was a bank to be tapped at his convenience. Linda, though quieter, seemed to align with her husband, her disinterest in my well-being almost palpable. Even Ethan, innocent as he was, occasionally mimicked his father's casual disregard for money, asking for things and expecting me to provide without question. Championship. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a gilded cage. I cooked, cleaned, and provided for a family that no longer appreciated the sacrifices I had made. The realization sank in slowly. I had been giving my life to people who saw it only as a resource. My treasure, the $70,000 I had saved, was no longer just a safety net. It was a weapon, a lifeline, and a target all at once. I began to think back on all the years I had worked, the hours I had spent bending over benches, sanding wood until my fingers bled, building a life not just for myself, but for my son. And now, that same son, the boy I had guided and loved unconditionally, seemed to have no respect for the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into every dollar, every piece of furniture, every moment of care. One afternoon, I caught Michael on the phone with Robert. His voice was low, conspiratorial. I could hear snippets. "Don't worry, we can cover it with Dad's card. He has plenty. He won't mind." My hands shook, my chest tight with anger and disbelief. It was all true. Every suspicion I had been suppressing was now confirmed. My son, the boy I had raised with love, was plotting behind my back. For the first time in decades, I felt a surge of helplessness. I thought of Emily, of the life we had built together, of the home I had left behind. All of it seemed tainted now, overshadowed by greed and betrayal. Yet, beneath the despair, a spark ignited. I realized that if I remained passive, if I continued to give without question, I would lose everything, not just money, but dignity, respect, and peace of mind. Professionalism. And so, I resolved silently, without yet revealing my intentions. I would observe. I would gather evidence. I would reclaim what was mine, not with anger, but with careful strategy and measured steps. The house was no longer a safe haven, but a chessboard, and I, the betrayed father, would begin to play. Imperialism days turned into weeks, and the tension grew. I maintained my routine, cooking, cleaning, helping Ethan. But my mind was always alert, watching, calculating. Every casual remark from Michael, every dismissive glance from Linda, every mention of money became a clue, a piece of the puzzle that would eventually lead me to the truth. Yet, I had to remain careful. Any misstep could tip them off. They had grown comfortable, believing me to be naive, docile, and trusting. That complacency would be my advantage. I would use it. I would protect my savings, my pride, and my life's work. As I lay in bed each night, listening to the faint sounds of the house, I felt a quiet determination building within me. The betrayal had awakened something I had long buried, the will to fight, the will to reclaim what was mine, the will to ensure that love, trust, and years of sacrifice were never exploited again. And so, the days of silent observation began. The simple routine that had once been my solace had transformed into a careful surveillance. Every smile, every word, every action from Michael and Linda was now a piece of evidence. I was no longer just a loving father. I was a guardian of my life, a protector of my dignity, and a man ready to reclaim what was rightfully his. The quiet house, once filled with comfort and nostalgia, had become the battleground where my mind would strategize, where betrayal would meet determination, and where the journey toward justice and reckoning would slowly unfold. The mornings had begun to feel heavy. Every step I took in the house seemed calculated. Every glance I cast felt suspicious. I moved like a man who had once trusted blindly, but had now been forced to question everything. Even the familiar creak of the floorboards seemed louder, more ominous, as if the house itself were whispering warnings I couldn't ignore. That Tuesday started like any other. Michael and Linda left early for work and errands, and Ethan was at school. I decided to make something special for lunch, a chicken soup that I had perfected over decades, the kind Michael loved when he was a boy. As I chopped vegetables and stirred the pot, the rhythmic motions calmed me. It felt like a small pocket of control in a life that had become unpredictable. Then, the front door opened. My heart clenched. I didn't hear Ethan's backpack drop, and the familiar rhythm of Michael's voice came first, followed by another, deeper tone. I froze, knife in midair. It was Robert, Linda's father. His presence always brought a subtle unease. He had a way of speaking that made you feel scrutinized, measured, evaluated. I had never been close to him, but I always tried to maintain civility. Today, however, civility was irrelevant. "And how are you going to pay for all that?" Robert asked, his tone sharp, almost accusatory. "MIL. The truck and the renovation are almost $50,000, he said, the words punctuated like a hammer striking a surface. "Misinformation. Don't worry, just use my dad's card. He's loaded," Michael replied casually. Smith seemed to stop. My knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the cutting board. I felt as though the floor had opened beneath me. My son had referred to me who had worked tirelessly for decades, who had given him everything without hesitation, as loaded. The words struck like a blade. Immigration. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the son I had raised with the man standing in the living room, speaking so carelessly about exploiting his father's money. My chest tightened, a sharp ache forming in the pit of my stomach. I moved silently, my legs trembling as I retreated down the hall to my bedroom. That small, familiar space suddenly felt like a sanctuary, a fortress where I could gather my thoughts. I closed the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, the same hands that had built furniture for hundreds of families in Chicago. They were the hands of a man who had given everything, who had trusted implicitly, who had believed in love and family. And now, those same hands felt powerless, trembling with anger and disbelief. I opened the wooden box in my closet, the one where I kept my important documents. My debit card lay there, a simple piece of plastic that had become the focal point of my betrayal. I barely used it, preferring to give Michael cash, trusting that he would manage responsibly. Had he used it without my permission before? The thought sent a chill down my spine. Emma. Footsteps approached. My pulse quickened. I shoved the box back into the closet and sat down, pretending to be calm. "Dad, are you okay?" Michael called, poking his head into the room without knocking. "Yes, just a bit of a headache," I replied, keeping my voice steady, careful not to reveal the turmoil inside. "Oh, well, my father-in-law is here. We're going to look at some things for the house. Hey, would you mind lending me your card?" Shimmer. I froze. "My card?" He asked for my card as casually as if asking for a glass of water. "I left it at the bank," I said carefully. "I had to get it renewed." Battleground. A flash of frustration crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. His casual smile returned, the same one that had masked his deceit. That smile had once comforted me, and now it was a reminder of the betrayal. I sat there, my mind spinning. 18 years of giving, of trusting, of sacrificing, all reduced to a casual conversation in the living room, my son exploiting me for money. My pension, my savings, my security, all taken for granted. Shields dragged on. I didn't move from my room, didn't eat lunch. I replayed the conversation in my mind, each word dissected, analyzed, weighed against the reality of my life. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt alien, suffocating, a place where betrayal lingered in the shadows. Later, I ventured out of my room and went into the living area, trying to act normal. Michael and Robert were examining renovation plans, discussing materials, labor, costs. Every mention of numbers, every reference to my money, felt like a personal attack, a violation of the trust I had placed in my son. That evening, I retreated to my bedroom again. I needed to think, to plan. Confrontation would not work yet. Michael was too confident, too dismissive, too comfortable in his assumption that I would continue to comply. I had to be careful. I had to observe. I had to gather information. Then, over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to everything. Conversations, receipts, phone calls. I noted every detail, every irregularity. Each revelation added fuel to the fire inside me. Michael's arrogance, his entitlement, and his dismissive attitude were undeniable. Linda's subtle complicity only confirmed the depth of the deception. Even Ethan, innocent as he seemed, mirrored his father's casual disregard for money, asking for things without understanding their value, expecting me to provide without question. The realization hit me hard. My life's work, my savings, my sacrifices had been exploited. I had been blind, naive, trusting without boundaries. But I was not powerless. I had lived a life of skill, intelligence, and independence. My carpentry had taught me patience, precision, and foresight. Now, those same qualities would serve me in navigating this betrayal. I began documenting everything. Every expense charged to my account, every mention of my money, every conversation that hinted at deceit. I recorded it all mentally, preparing for the moment I would need proof. I would not allow myself to be the victim any longer. The betrayal had awakened a fire in me, a resolve to protect myself and my future. Sentenced. As the weeks passed, the tension in the house became palpable. I maintained my routine, pretending to be the same compliant, trusting father, while inside I was calculating, strategizing, planning. Every smile, every casual remark from Michael, every dismissive glance from Linda became a piece of evidence, a clue to their intentions. Disproportionately, at night, I lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic. It all seemed magnified, charged with significance. I realized that the house, once a home, had become a chessboard. Every action, every movement, every conversation was a move in a game I had just begun to understand. Rematch, silently, over and over, that I would reclaim what was mine. Not with rash anger, not with blind confrontation, but with careful observation, strategic planning, and quiet determination. The betrayal had awakened something I had long buried, the will to fight, the will to reclaim control over my life, and the will to ensure that my decades of work, sacrifice, and love were never exploited again. And so, the days of silent observation continued. My simple routine, cooking, cleaning, helping Ethan, became a cover for the careful surveillance I conducted. I watched Michael and Linda closely, noting every detail, every inconsistency, every trace of their true intentions. I was no longer just a father. I was a man wronged, a guardian of his dignity, and a strategist preparing to confront a betrayal that had gone too far. The seed of anger and determination had taken root, growing slowly but steadily. And I knew, deep within my bones, that the reckoning was only a matter of time. The house may have been theirs now, but the fight for justice, for dignity, for the life I had earned, was just beginning. The realization of betrayal had changed everything. What had once been a warm, familiar house now felt like a trap. Every creak of the floorboards, every casual laugh of Michael or Linda, every question from Ethan seemed charged with hidden meaning. I moved through the halls with quiet precision, careful not to draw attention to the storm brewing inside me. The calm, compliant father I had once been was gone, replaced by a man who had tasted deception and resolved to respond in kind. That morning, the sun filtered weakly through the blinds, casting faint shadows on the hardwood floor. I rose early as always, brewing coffee and preparing breakfast, but my hands trembled, not from age but from anticipation. Today, I knew, I would begin to confront my own complacency. I could not yet confront Michael directly. He was too confident, too smug, too comfortable in his assumption that I would continue to give. I had to gather evidence first, to observe, to understand, to plan. As I moved quietly through the kitchen, I reflected on the past 18 years. I had given him everything: my house, my pension, my time, my unwavering trust. I had raised him with love and care, guiding him through life's challenges, teaching him values I held dear. And yet, he had seen my generosity not as love, but as a resource. The thought made bile rise in my throat. I paused, staring at the counter, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge. I decided to check my bank statements that morning. Sitting at the small desk in my bedroom, I logged into my online banking. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every charge fueled a growing anger inside me. There it was, laid bare in black and white. Purchases I had not authorized, renovations I had not approved, loans I had not consented to. The magnitude of the betrayal hit me like a hammer. Michael had been using my money without my knowledge, assuming that I would never question him. I felt a surge of both fear and determination. Fear because I had been naive for so long. Determination because I realized that if I did not act, I would lose everything: my savings, my dignity, my control over my own life. I resolved silently, firmly, that this would not continue. I would confront this betrayal, but carefully. Rash words would be useless. I needed a plan, a strategy, and patience. Later that day, I watched Michael and Linda move about the house. They spoke casually, laughing at minor jokes, discussing renovations, shopping lists, and upcoming bills. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but I saw through it now. Every word, every gesture, every glance was a window into their true intentions. They believed I was oblivious, that I would continue to comply, that my trust was theirs to exploit. They were wrong. I dismissing everything. I recorded dates, amounts, and purposes of every transaction, noting patterns of deception. I observed Michael's behavior closely, noting how he spoke to Robert and how he casually referred to my money as if it were his own. Linda's subtle complicity became clear. She never questioned him, never suggested restraint, never acknowledged the ethical breach. Even Ethan's casual requests for money, his mimicry of his father's attitude, became part of the picture I was slowly constructing. As the days went on, I realized that confrontation would need to be precise. I could not accuse him blindly. I needed proof, a clear record, evidence that could not be dismissed. My years as a carpenter had taught me patience, precision, and attention to detail. Those same skills would now serve me in a different arena, the careful observation and documentation of betrayal within my own family. One evening after dinner, I retreated to my room, my mind racing with possibilities. I considered confronting Michael directly, but every scenario ended with his smirk, his casual dismissal, and my anger simmering without resolution. I realized that direct confrontation now would be premature, possibly dangerous. Had grown confident in his power over me. I needed to dismantle that perception, quietly, methodically. Began making small changes in my behavior. I acted compliant, cooperative, and unsuspecting, giving no hint that I had discovered the betrayal. I continued cooking, cleaning, and helping Ethan, maintaining the facade of the trusting father and grandfather. But beneath the surface, I was alert, calculating, waiting for the right moment to act. Every casual question from Michael, every mention of money, every transaction I observed became a piece of the puzzle. I was no longer a passive participant. I was an active observer, a strategist in my own home. Michael talking to Robert about a new purchase. "We'll just use my dad's card again. He's never going to question it," he said casually. My stomach twisted. He had no shame, no awareness of his wrongdoing, no recognition of the trust he had violated. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain calm. Patience, I reminded myself. Observation first, action later. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in my mind. I thought of Emily, of the life we had built, of the sacrifices I had made for Michael and Ethan. The betrayal cut deep, sharper than any tool I had ever used in my carpentry. And yet, beneath the hurt, a determination grew stronger. I would not be a victim. I would reclaim control, restore my dignity, and protect what was mine. Over the next week, I implemented small tests to gauge Michael's behavior. I asked casually about expenses, observing his reactions, noting inconsistencies in his explanations. I feigned ignorance while secretly checking account statements and cross-referencing transactions. Every lie, every slip, every careless comment reinforced the picture I was constructing. Michael was confident, complacent, and careless. That complacency would be my advantage. I also began to plan for my future. The $70,000 I had saved, the money I had worked for my entire life, would be protected. I would not allow it to be taken without my consent. I made mental notes of ways to secure it, to create boundaries that Michael could not breach. I realized that this was not just about money. It was about dignity, respect, and the principle of trust between a father and his son. The house, once a place of comfort and memory, had become a battleground of observation and strategy. I moved through each room carefully, noting where conversations took place, who was involved, and what was said. I kept my interactions polite, cooperative, and unassuming, masking the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Michael and Linda continued their routines, oblivious to the scrutiny they were under. Also began reflecting on my own mindset. For years I had believed in the inherent goodness of people, in family above all else. That belief had been exploited, but I realized that belief did not have to die. It could evolve. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Generosity must be measured, not blind. Love must coexist with boundaries, or it becomes a tool for manipulation. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a transformation within me. The passive, trusting father had been replaced by a man alert, calculating, and ready. I knew that the confrontation would come eventually. Not yet, but soon. I would have the evidence, the clarity, and the strategy needed to reclaim what was mine. And so, life continued in the house, outwardly unchanged, but charged with tension beneath the surface. I maintained my routine, helped Ethan, cooked meals, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was awake, aware, and preparing. The betrayal had sparked a fire, a resolve to act, and a determination to restore balance in my life. The first confrontation would not be reckless. It would be precise, deliberate, and undeniable. And when it came, Michael and Linda would finally realize that the father they had underestimated was far stronger, wiser, and more determined than they could ever imagine. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and the game of reclaiming trust, dignity, and justice had only just begun. The days in the house passed like a slow, suffocating fog. What had once been a home filled with warmth, comfort, and memories of Emily's laughter now felt like a prison lined with deceit. Every glance, every word, every gesture from Michael and Linda carried the weight of suspicion. The betrayal I had overheard weeks ago had planted a seed of distrust that grew into a sprawling, tangled web in my mind. I found myself questioning everything, every decision I had made, every act of generosity, every moment of trust. It was the quietest moments that struck me the hardest. I would watch Michael casually walking past the kitchen, laughing at a joke Linda had made, completely unaware that I had overheard him plotting to use my money. He had assumed, without a second thought, that his father's life savings were there for the taking. I remembered how I had given him every pension check, every dollar I could spare, believing in the goodness of my son. And now, that trust had been shattered. I began scrutinizing my own actions, asking myself hard questions. Had I been naive all these years? Blind to signs that my son might take advantage of me? Could I have protected myself sooner? My hands, once steady and skilled from decades of carpentry, now trembled as I held receipts, bank statements, and letters from the bank. The numbers told a story I had not wanted to hear, yet could no longer ignore. Michael had not just taken money, he had taken control of my life. My $70,000 in savings, the result of decades of work, careful planning, and sacrifice, had been reduced to a tool for his personal gain. Each unauthorized withdrawal, each casual remark about using Dad's card, gnawed at me. It was not merely the money, it was the audacity, the lack of remorse, the assumption that I would never notice. One afternoon I sat in my small back room, the wooden box of documents open on the desk before me. I meticulously went through every record, tracing every charge, every payment, every transfer. I began to see patterns emerge. Trips to hardware stores that I had not approved, online orders for tools and equipment I had never requested, deposits and withdrawals that were carefully disguised as household expenses. Michael had been operating under the assumption that I was oblivious, that I trusted blindly. Sluggish. I realized that my role in the house had been reduced to that of a caretaker, a provider, a passive participant in a life that no longer belonged to me. I cooked, cleaned, watched over Ethan, and managed the household, all while the people I had trusted most manipulated my resources behind my back. It was a cruel irony that my devotion had been weaponized against me. Throttle, innocent and unaware, often mirrored his father's attitudes. He would ask for money for trivial things, assuming I would comply without question. His casual expectations mirrored Michael's entitlement, and it pained me to see the child of my blood learning the same patterns of disregard and manipulation. I realized that my influence over him, while meaningful, was fragile in the face of these examples. Lush. I began to plan in earnest. Confrontation without preparation would be reckless. I needed evidence, clarity, and control. I started keeping detailed notes of every suspicious interaction, every unauthorized charge, every phrase that hinted at ulterior motives. I documented dates, amounts, and circumstances, turning my home into a quiet arena of observation. Every move, every conversation, every casual remark became a piece of a larger puzzle I was slowly assembling. Exexism. At night, I lay awake, the house silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. I replayed conversations in my mind, imagining how Michael would respond if confronted, weighing the risks and benefits of every approach. My anger simmered beneath the surface, a slow, steady burn that fueled my determination. I would not let this betrayal go unaddressed. I would protect my savings, my dignity, and my peace of mind. Submitted. Yet, I also wrestled with the emotional cost. For decades, I had believed in the goodness of people, in the strength of family, in the power of love and trust. That belief had been exploited, twisted into a tool for manipulation. I felt a deep sadness, a sense of loss not just for my money, but for the ideal of family I had cherished. I questioned whether I had been foolish, whether my devotion had blinded me to the truth. Despite the turmoil, I found strength in small routines. Preparing meals, helping Ethan with homework, polishing old furniture. These acts reminded me of who I was. They reminded me that I had skills, experience, and a lifetime of work that no one could take from me. My carpentry had taught me patience, precision, and resilience. Those same lessons would now guide me through the more complex challenges of betrayal, manipulation, and deceit within my own family. One afternoon, I decided to test Michael subtly. I asked him about a recent purchase that had been charged to my account. "Michael, I noticed a charge at the hardware store last week. Can you remind me what that was for?" I asked casually, my voice steady. His eyes flickered with a hint of surprise, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, that's nothing, Dad. Just some things for the house renovation," he said, dismissing the question with a wave of his hand. His nonchalance only confirmed what I already suspected. He was confident in his ability to manipulate, in the assumption that I would not challenge him. Sluggish and subtlety and strategy were key. Direct confrontation now would be ineffective. I needed to remain calm, observe carefully, and gather evidence. The house was no longer just a home. It had become a chessboard, with every move deliberate, every action calculated. I was no longer a passive participant. I was a strategist, preparing to reclaim control over my life. Deceived turned into weeks, and my observations continued. I noted Michael's patterns, Linda's complicity, and even Ethan's subtle mimicry of his father's attitudes. Each detail, each inconsistency, each lie was recorded in my mind, stored carefully for the moment when I would act. I was building a case, not out of revenge, but out of necessity, to protect what was mine, to restore dignity, and to ensure that trust was not further exploited. During this time, I also began to reflect on my own choices. Had I been too trusting? Too generous? Had I failed to establish boundaries that might have prevented this betrayal? These questions weighed heavily on me, but they also strengthened my resolve. I realized that the lessons I had taught Michael as a child, patience, responsibility, respect, had not been absorbed in the way I had hoped. I needed to take responsibility for the present, for my own security, and for the restoration of justice in my life. I began implementing small safeguards. I updated passwords, monitored bank notifications more closely, and considered alternative ways to protect my savings. I knew Michael would not anticipate such measures, that he would assume I remained passive. That complacency would be my advantage. Every precaution, every careful observation, every strategic move was preparing me for the day when I would confront him, not in anger, but with clarity, evidence, and control. Even as I continued my daily routines, cooking, cleaning, helping Ethan, I felt a quiet transformation within me. The passive, trusting father had been replaced by a vigilant, calculating man. I was no longer merely reacting to events. I was preparing, planning, and positioning myself for the moment when I would reclaim what was mine. The betrayal had awakened a strength I had not realized I still possessed, a combination of patience, intelligence, and determination that would guide me through the coming challenges. As I polished an old wooden chair one evening, I reflected on the journey so far. The anger, the sadness, the disbelief, they had all shaped me, teaching me lessons about trust, family, and the necessity of boundaries. I realized that confrontation was inevitable, but it would not be impulsive. It would be deliberate, strategic, and undeniable. Michael and Linda had underestimated me for too long. They had assumed my trust would never waver. They were wrong. The house remained outwardly the same, filled with the routines of daily life. Yet beneath the surface, the dynamics had shifted. I was no longer simply a father providing for his family. I was a man reclaiming control, observing carefully, preparing for the eventual confrontation. Every meal I cooked, every chore I performed, every interaction I had was now part of a larger strategy. A slow, deliberate preparation for the day when justice would be restored. And in that quiet resolve, I found a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal had been a harsh awakening, but it had also revealed the strength, resilience, and wisdom that I had accumulated over a lifetime. I knew that the path ahead would require patience, careful planning, and unwavering focus. But I was ready. The day would come when Michael would finally understand that his father was not merely a source of money or a passive observer, but a man capable of reclaiming what was rightfully his. The seed of betrayal had taken root, but it had also ignited a fire within me, a fire that would not be extinguished until balance, respect, and justice were restored. And so, I continued my careful observation, my meticulous planning, and my quiet preparation, knowing that the moment of reckoning was drawing ever closer. The house had changed. At first glance, it appeared ordinary, as it always had. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards, the laughter of a child playing in the living room. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. The betrayal I had uncovered weeks ago had transformed my perception of every sound, every glance, every casual word exchanged in these walls. Every moment, I realized, was an opportunity to observe, to analyze, to prepare. Michael and Linda remained blissfully unaware. They carried on with their routines, convinced that I was still the trusting, compliant father I had always been. Their confidence was their vulnerability. I had been naive for years, giving them everything without question. But now, I understood that patience, careful observation, and strategy were my greatest allies. That morning, I awoke earlier than usual, my mind already active, calculating. Breakfast was prepared as usual, the aroma of eggs and toast filling the kitchen. Ethan's laughter echoed down the hall as he came in, backpack slung over one shoulder, ready for another day at school. I smiled at him, hiding the storm inside. To him, I remained the doting grandfather, a safe harbor in a world he did not yet understand. After breakfast, I retreated to my small bedroom, the wooden box containing my documents and bank statements open before me. Each line, each transaction, each unexplained withdrawal told a story of betrayal. I traced the expenditures carefully, creating a timeline in my mind of Michael's financial manipulations. It was meticulous work, tedious yet necessary. Every detail mattered. Every oversight could be exploited later. I realized that direct confrontation was not the answer, not yet. I had to create a silent strategy, a methodical approach that would allow me to protect my savings, regain control of my life, and hold Michael accountable. This strategy would be my armor, my shield, and eventually, my weapon. The first step was to secure my money. I had worked decades to save $70,000, a sum representing countless hours of labor, splinters in my fingers, and aching muscles. I began by updating passwords, contacting the bank, and setting up notifications for every transaction. Michael's confidence had been built on the assumption that I was passive, that I trusted blindly. That assumption would soon crumble. Next, I needed information. Every purchase, every mention of money, every casual remark became a clue. I started keeping a detailed mental log, noting dates, amounts, and contexts. I observed Michael closely, noting patterns in his spending, the way he spoke to Robert, his father-in-law, and even how Linda interacted with him. Every inconsistency, every casual lie, every hint of entitlement became a piece of the puzzle I was assembling. One afternoon, as I polished an old wooden chair, I overheard Michael on the phone with Robert. "Don't worry, Dad's card will cover it. He won't question a thing," he said casually. My hands froze mid-polish. The audacity, the sheer nonchalance, was staggering. Yet, instead of reacting, I remained calm, letting the words sink in. This was a confirmation of everything I had suspected. Michael believed he could manipulate me without consequence. That evening after dinner, I began planning more subtle measures. I started creating opportunities to test Michael's behavior without alerting him to my awareness. I would casually ask about past expenses, observe his responses, and note any hesitation, inconsistency, or defensiveness. I maintained the facade of trust, of ignorance, while secretly gathering the ammunition I would need. I also considered the emotional dimension. Michael was my son, and Ethan was my grandson. The thought of confrontation brought a tangle of emotions: anger, disappointment, sadness, and even a lingering hope that Michael could change. But hope alone could not protect me. I had to act with strategy and precision, ensuring that my actions were guided by logic and foresight rather than emotion alone. During this period, I also began reflecting on my past decisions. I had been generous, patient, and trusting, believing that these qualities would ensure a happy, harmonious family life. Instead, they had been exploited. But I refused to dwell on regret. Instead, I channeled my energy into planning, into strengthening my position, into preparing for the day when the truth would be undeniable. I started small. I changed the location of my bank documents, keeping them even more secure. I began keeping a ledger of cash withdrawals, noting who requested money, when, and for what purpose. I ensured that every transaction, every interaction was documented, forming an unassailable record. Meanwhile, I continued my daily routines with care. Breakfast, homework with Ethan, cooking meals, cleaning. I maintained the illusion of the compliant, trusting father. Michael and Linda had no idea that every casual request, every assumed entitlement, was being observed, analyzed, and recorded. Their complacency was my advantage. One evening, I overheard Linda mentioning to Michael that they might need more funds for home improvements. Michael laughed. "Don't worry, Dad's card will cover it. He's got plenty." I clenched my fists but said nothing. Silence was my weapon now. Reacting impulsively would alert them to my awareness. Patience and precision would serve me better. As the days progressed, I refined my strategy further. I considered legal options, methods to protect my finances, and ways to regain control without creating unnecessary conflict. I realized that Michael and Linda had underestimated me, assuming that age or familial obligation would render me passive. They were wrong. I had spent a lifetime building, crafting, planning, and executing with skill and precision. Those skills, honed over decades of carpentry, would now guide me through the complex landscape of betrayal and manipulation within my own family. Ethan remained a constant in this tumultuous period. His innocence was both comforting and motivating. I realized that I needed to protect not only my savings and dignity, but also the example he would carry into adulthood. If I allowed manipulation and deceit to go unchecked, it would set a precedent he might emulate. My responsibility to him reinforced my determination to act with care, strategy, and unwavering resolve. Each day, my observation became more detailed, more nuanced. I noticed patterns in Michael's behavior. The times he requested money, the way he justified expenses, the casual way he referred to my savings as if it were a limitless resource. I recorded everything mentally, creating a comprehensive map of deceit and entitlement. I also began preparing contingencies. What if Michael confronted me? What if he accused me of overreacting? What if Linda sided with him openly? Each scenario was considered, each response planned. I realized that the success of my strategy depended not only on gathering evidence, but also on controlling my own reactions, maintaining composure, and acting decisively when the time was right. Night after night, I lay awake in my small bedroom, listening to the faint sounds of the house. Every laugh, every footstep, every casual conversation became a signal, a data point, a piece of the strategy that was slowly taking shape. The fire within me, ignited by betrayal, was now focused, disciplined, and unwavering. Finally, I recognized a fundamental truth. I could not change the past, and I could not control Michael's actions, but I could control my response. I could protect what was mine, restore dignity, and ensure that trust, once broken, would not be exploited again. My silent strategy was not about revenge. It was about justice, self-preservation, and the careful restoration of balance in a life that had been disrupted by betrayal. The house continued to function outwardly as it always had, filled with the routines of daily life. But beneath the surface, a quiet, relentless plan was taking shape. Every casual interaction, every assumed entitlement, every moment of complacency by Michael and Linda brought me closer to the day when I would act, not impulsively, but with precision, clarity, and authority. Shells of betrayal had grown, but it had also awakened a strength, a vigilance, and a determination that could not be ignored. The silent strategy was in motion, and the day of reckoning was approaching. Michael and Linda had no idea that the father they had underestimated was now fully aware, fully prepared, and ready to reclaim control over his life, his savings, and his dignity. The day finally arrived, a day I had been preparing for, meticulously planning in the quiet hours of night, while Michael and Linda remained blissfully unaware of the storm building beneath the calm surface. I had spent weeks documenting, observing, and strategizing. Every transaction, every casual remark, every assumption Michael had made about my compliance had been carefully recorded in my mind and on paper. The pieces of the puzzle were now complete, and the moment for action had come. The morning began like any other. I rose early, as I always had, and brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen. Ethan padded in, still sleepy, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Grandpa," he mumbled, reaching for a glass of milk. I smiled at him, hiding the fire simmering inside me. To him, I was still the same patient, loving grandfather who helped with homework and shared stories of the past. But beneath the surface, I was fully aware of the stakes. Today, the dynamic in this house would shift forever. I prepared breakfast as usual, the aroma of eggs and toast filling the kitchen. Michael and Linda remained oblivious to the tension coiling in every corner of the house. Their confidence, their assumption of my passivity, had been their greatest mistake. I had observed long enough to know precisely how to proceed, and the knowledge gave me a quiet satisfaction. Once breakfast was done, I led Ethan to the table to finish his homework. While he worked, I carefully placed the documents, bank statements, and receipts on the dining table. I had organized them chronologically, highlighting every unauthorized withdrawal, every transaction Michael had attempted to disguise, and every instance of casual entitlement. The evidence was undeniable. The story of betrayal was now written in black and white. Michael entered the kitchen, whistling casually, completely unaware that I had orchestrated this moment. "Morning, Dad," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair. I nodded, maintaining my calm exterior, waiting for him to settle into the room. I cleared my throat. "Michael, sit down for a moment," I said, my voice calm but carrying an authority that immediately caught his attention. He looked at me, puzzled. "What's this about?" he asked, glancing at the table. I gestured to the documents laid out before him. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about finances." Michael's eyes flickered briefly, a trace of unease, but he quickly masked it with casual indifference. "Finances? What do you mean?" he asked, attempting to maintain control of the conversation. I took a deep breath and began, slowly, methodically. "I've been reviewing our bank statements, Michael. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every purchase charged to my account. It's all here. And what I've discovered is troubling. I spread the documents across the table, sliding each piece toward him. You've been using my money without my consent. You've made purchases, renovations, and withdrawals, all under the assumption that I wouldn't notice. Mike leaned back, a faint smirk crossing his face. Dad, come on, it's just money. You've got plenty, he said, trying to dismiss the situation, just as he had assumed I always would. Climbing. It's not about the amount, Michael. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that I've spent decades working, saving, and providing for this family, and you've treated that effort as if it were a limitless resource for your convenience. My voice remained steady, controlled, but each word carried the weight of years of betrayal and disappointment. Linda stepped closer, her expression defensive. David, maybe you're overreacting. We didn't mean any harm, she said, attempting to interject to smooth over the confrontation. I turned my gaze to her, unwavering. Intentions don't erase consequences, Linda. Actions matter. And what has happened here is not just a mistake. It's a deliberate exploitation of trust. Missel's smirk faltered, replaced by unease. He shuffled in his seat, glancing at the organized documents, the clear evidence of his deception. For the first time, he realized that I had not been oblivious, that I had been observing, documenting, and preparing. His confidence, built on the assumption of my compliance, was crumbling. I continued, my voice measured, deliberate. I want to be clear, Michael. I am not seeking revenge. I am seeking accountability. I am seeking a restoration of the respect and trust that you have violated, and I want you to understand the seriousness of what you've done. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. No excuses, no explanations for now, just acknowledgement. You have crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and it is time for that to be recognized. I could see the shift in his posture, the tension in his jaw. He had underestimated me for too long. He had assumed that I would continue to comply, that I would remain the passive provider, the trusting father who never questioned his son's intentions. But that father was gone. In his place stood a man who had been wronged, who had documented every action, and who was now fully aware of the manipulation. I teammates to the practical matter. The one matter. The $70,000 I've saved over decades. It is mine. It will remain secure. From now on, any transactions involving my finances will require my approval, and no one will be allowed to access it without my consent. That includes both of you. Michael's eyes widened. Dad, come on. This is extreme, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. He had realized that his usual tactics, smiling, dismissing, assuming my compliance, were no longer effective. Breathing, unwavering. Extreme? Perhaps, but necessary. Trust has been broken, and boundaries must be enforced. This is about respect, accountability, and ensuring that what I have worked for is not exploited further. Linda stepped closer again, her tone more conciliatory. David, we can make this work. We don't want conflict, she said, attempting to appeal to emotion rather than logic. I shook my head. It's too late for avoidance. What has happened requires acknowledgement and correction. I am giving you the opportunity to respect the boundaries I am establishing. That is all. Crimson. For a moment, silence filled the room. The tension was palpable. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing that the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. He had assumed control over my finances, over my generosity, over my life. But now, the balance had changed. I had reclaimed authority, dignity, and awareness. Lizelle looked at Ethan, who was quietly observing the exchange. His eyes were wide, absorbing the lesson being taught not just in words, but in action. Boundaries, accountability, and the consequences of betrayal were being made clear. I knew that this moment would shape his understanding of integrity, responsibility, and the meaning of family. Finally, I concluded, my voice calm but firm. From this point forward, There will be transparency, accountability, and respect. My finances are off limits without explicit approval. My trust will no longer be assumed, and my patience, which has been exploited for too long, is not infinite. Michael's face was pale now, his earlier confidence replaced by the dawning realization of his father's resolve. Linda's defensiveness softened into reluctant acknowledgement. The reckoning, long overdue, had arrived. I allowed a moment of silence to settle, letting the weight of the confrontation sink in. This was not vengeance, it was justice, restoration, and protection of what was rightfully mine. The manipulation, the casual exploitation, and the assumption of my passivity were over. In the following days, I implemented practical measures to protect my finances and assert boundaries. Access to accounts was restricted, passwords were changed, and a system of accountability was established. Michael, chastened and aware of the consequences of his actions, became more cautious, more respectful, and more aware of the trust he had violated. Linda, too, adjusted her behavior, understanding that manipulation would no longer be tolerated. The house slowly returned to a sense of balance, though the lessons of betrayal lingered in memory. I continued my routines, cooking, cleaning, helping Ethan, now with a renewed sense of control, dignity, and purpose. The fire ignited by betrayal had transformed into a disciplined vigilance, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Most importantly, I realized that the reckoning had not just restored my control over finances, it had restored my self-respect. The years of sacrifice, hard work, and love had not been in vain. I had faced betrayal, observed carefully, planned meticulously, and acted decisively. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my boundaries. This, Ethan, witnessing the events unfold, learned a very profound lesson about respect, accountability, and the importance of honesty. He would carry these lessons forward, understanding the value of integrity and the consequences of exploitation. And as I sat in my small room, surrounded by the tools of a lifetime, documents, ledgers, and memories, I realized that life, even when marked by betrayal, could be reclaimed through patience, observation, and strategic action. The house was no longer just a home. It was a testament to resilience, awareness, and the quiet power of a man who refused to be exploited. The reckoning had been delivered. The boundaries were established. The betrayal acknowledged and addressed. And I, David Miller, had restored order, dignity, and control to the life I had built with my own hands, one piece at a time.